Hello, Federal viewers. Welcome to this live discussion. Voting for the first phase of Bihar elections has just begun. To understand the ground reality, the real mood on the ground, and to discuss further, we've got our political editor, Puneet Yadav. Puneet has toured Bihar extensively ahead of the assembly elections. So, Puneet, sir, my first question to you is what is your assessment of the ground situation? Is Bihar eager to vote today?
Well, certainly, I mean, there is a sense of eagerness to vote,
Right.
but this is an election that's extremely interesting at many levels. What I sensed through the last several days of my travel, and I'll be, I'm just, in, I'm in Simanchal right now, in Purnia, and I'll be taking a flight back to Delhi after, in soon after we finish recording this. So, what I've seen is that while there is an eagerness to vote, while there is also a very strong, resentment against
Right.
several MLAs, against several things that the government has done or not done, it's also an election where it's very rare to find anyone who has anything negative to say about the chief minister.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
so there may be a very strong sense of anti incumbency against several sitting MLAs who are in the fray, or against even certain political parties that are part of the ruling alliance.
Mhm.
But nobody seems to want the chief minister to be changed.
Okay, that's very interesting,
You know,
right?
there's that happening at one level. There are a lot of, when we talk of Bihar, and especially among in the national media or the so-called mainstream media, there are several narratives that seem to be doing the rounds. But when you come to here to the state and you see uh, what's playing out on the ground, it's a very different scenario. So a lot of the narratives you'll hear at the national level, here it all ultimately boils down to despite, as I said, all the anti-incumbency, all the anger, all the expectations from a new government, it
Right.
eventually boils down to what is the caste calculation, who is, which caste is going to vote en masse for which political party, which caste is going to see a fragmentation of its vote between the two dominant alliances. Uh, you know, uh, why a particular individual who's come into the election fray this time with a new political party who's making a lot of waves in the mainstream media seems to be completely absent from
Right.
the narrative. When you go to the ground,
Right.
I'm talking about Mr. Prashant Kishore, who people simply dismiss.
Right.
So it is a very interesting election at many levels.
Right. Let's talk a bit about SIR. So, has it in any way dampened the enthusiasm on the ground? So, like, is there actually anxiety about the voter rolls in Bihar?
See, Raghavi, that's the interesting thing, and perhaps that's why how you started the question. Let's talk a bit about SIR. The SIR is only a bit issue in this election, barring and which may surprise a lot of people, who are not familiar with Bihar politics or who are only understanding Bihar through, the national media or the mainstream media or the headlines and all of that. Uh, it's strange. There is, and it's also something that has evolved over the last few months. When Rahul Gandhi and Tejashwi Yadav were taking out their voter adhikar yatra,
Right.
SIR seemed to be the only issue any Bihari was willing to talk about. And this was not very far off in the past. I'm talking about the month of September.
Correct.
And now we're in mid November, or in fact, the first week of November. And barring the four districts of Simanchal, which are Purnia, Araria, Katihar, and Kishanganj, which has, ranging between about 38 to 39% to, up to 68% Muslim voters across these four districts. Uh, and because these are districts that also share a border, some of these districts share a border with Bengal, some of them share a border with Nepal. These are districts where there is still very visible kind of an anxiety
Correct.
over, over SIR, or uh, rather, I would say more than the SIR, Mr. Narendra Modi's narrative of Ghuspetia,
Right.
and the infiltrator thing that he
Mhm.
has decided to brand almost anybody and everybody with. So these districts, yes, you'll hear some things about infiltrator, SIR, and all that. But otherwise, on the ground, the SIR issue seems to have, vote chori. Fine, it's a catchy phrase that has caught on, but I don't think it's making any impact electorally in the choice that people want to make while casting their vote, as they'll do across 121 seats today in the first phase. So
Correct.
it's not exactly the kind of issue that people thought it would turn into.
Really interesting. You touched a bit about how, in most people from the ground don't want the CM to be changed. There isn't much anti-incumbency against the CM. But what is like the other any other strong sentiment that you come across among the people in Bihar?
See, I mean, there are very many issues. The jobs certainly is one of the biggest, most talked about issues that I have come across personally while traveling. Jobs, economic situation, and financial distress.
Correct.
As a kind of mix of these three issues. So that certainly is a big issue. But as you would know, Mr. Tejashwi Yadav, who's the CM face of the alliance, of the Grand Alliance, which is the opposition, rival for the NDA, they had promised one government job per household in Bihar.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that was supposed to have been a turning point in the election.
Okay.
But, strangely enough, when you talk to people on the ground, of course, I mean, there is also uh, there may also be biases at play when this kind of reporting is done, because there is one section that would say that that would raise a lot of questions on the feasibility of
Correct.
Mr. Tejashwi Yadav's promise and whether it can be delivered. But the same lot of people don't seem to raise any question on the BJP and the JDU, the ruling NDA alliance's promise, which was made just a couple of days ago, of providing 1 crore jobs
Correct.
in Bihar, if voted back to power. If you remember, Mr. Narendra Modi in 2014 had promised 2 crore jobs a year, and that was supposed to be for all India.
Okay.
Okay, 11 years later, I don't know how many of those 2 crore jobs have been provided, but simple arithmetic would tell you that if it was supposed to be 2 crore jobs per year for the whole country, how are you promising 1 crore jobs in Bihar alone? Right.
Right.
So anyone with any kind of any sense of objectivity would raise that question, but those are not questions that are unfortunately being raised in Bihar. What
Correct.
is happening, interestingly, is that while everyone recognizes that
Hmm.
unemployment is a major issue, it needs to be dealt with at war footing, jobs need to be created, the youth are going into all kinds of, uh, you know, sh- uh, let's say, nefarious activities. And
Correct.
to prevent that, the best way would be to give them gainful employment. When you actually talk to them and ask these people who do they trust more in giving them that employment, even 20 years after running the state and lording over this level of unemployment, people seem to trust Nitish Kumar more with giving employment than they trust Tejashwi.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
and
yeah.
of course, there are, because Bihar is also a state where every political party has its own very sort of captive vote bank among different castes.
Yeah.
And some of these castes are more, people from some of these castes are more vocal. So you see them more, you hear them more, on TV channels, on social media, and all of that. So in the case of Mr. Tejashwi Yadav, the Yadav population, which is 14% of Bihar's population, it's one of the largest chunks in terms of castes. Uh, one individual caste and not a caste grouping. Uh, they invariably at public meetings, at charahas, at shops, and all, you will bump into. There's a greater possibility of you bumping into a very vocal Yadav than a very vocal Dalit or a very vocal, extremely backward backward caste individual. And so the RJD supporters would very vocally tell you that no, no, only Tejashwi can give you jobs. But when you go in the areas and the villages, the smaller
Right.
towns, and you spend a little more time talking to a cross section of people, you get a sense that fine, there is anxiety over jobs, but at the same time, people think that fine, Tejashwi may have done a good job in the brief period that he was deputy chief minister and he created employment. But now we trust Nitish Kumar more in terms of,
Right.
uh, you know, delivering more jobs in the future than Tejashwi. So it's a very, I mean, there are many contradictions in these narratives also at play, but at the same time, it's also very fascinating for a lot of people who may not be familiar with
Correct.
what's happening on the ground here.
Correct. These are very valuable insights we are getting to discuss from the ground. Talking about promises, right? Both the NDA and the Mahagathbandhan gave out a lot of promises for the women voters. So, how enthusiastic are women about these promises, and what is your assessment on that?
Well, I think one of the promises that seems to have really, really clicked in this election is the Mukhyamantri Mahila Rozgar Yojana. And of course, with for obvious reasons, because in complete uh, disregard of how a fair election should be conducted, the
Mhm.
government went around disbursing those 10,000 rupees to women voters across Bihar,
Okay.
who qualified under that scheme for that dole.
Correct.
Now, I'll give you, it's better perhaps to give you an example based on a caste group to put this in perspective. The other day, I was visiting a small cottage unit where people, people from the Malla community were
Mhm.
involved in the processing of makhana, fox nuts, which is one of
Right.
the biggest things here in terms of, production, the agricultural produce.
Right.
And, 90% of the world's makhana produce goes from India. So, and Bihar is its hub. So,
Correct.
a lot of the people involved in its processing come from, very, very backward communities like the Mallas, the Nishads, different subgroups of the Nishads. And this was an election where we were being told that the Nishads are strongly consolidating behind the Grand Alliance of, the
Okay.
opposition alliance, because Mr. Mukesh Sahni has been projected as the Grand Alliance deputy CM face under Tejashwi Yadav. And he comes from a Malla family, a Malla caste. He calls himself the son of Malla. He has his own political party, which is perhaps for the first time in Bihar that there is that the Mallas, the Nishads, have got an an identity in terms of a political outfit and not just a leader.
Okay.
So that was supposed to marshal the Nishad community, which
Mhm.
collectively of all its subcastes accounts for about 9.6% of Bihar's population. And
Okay.
these are people who live all along the riverine belts of Bihar, and that's a substantial number of assembly constituencies. So when we were at this Foxnut processing unit, uh, there were a lot of women who were actually involved in the processing
Mhm.
of, in the cleaning up and all that of the
Right.
fox nuts. And then there were, of course, their husbands or their children, the men who were also doing their share of work. And the divide was so clearly visible. I asked several women
Mhm.
about the schemes of the chief minister, about this 10,000 rupee dole that's been given out pre-election. The next installment, I believe, is to be given out tomorrow on the 7th.
Okay.
And most of the women said that we don't care, how others are going to vote. We are going to vote for Nitish Kumar
Okay.
because he has given us this money. And when you try and discuss with them that how are you going to repay this, because this money is part of a microfinance sort of a scheme, and
Right.
it's not something that's just being given out. The beneficiaries, after a certain period of time, they'll have to return this money. So when
Right.
when we asked those women, that do you have a business model in mind? How are you
Mhm.
going to repay this? They said we don't have to repay it. And
Okay.
there was a gentleman who was standing there who came and said and tried to reason with one of these ladies and said that no, you will have to repay. And she simply said that no, Nitish Kumar has said we don't have to repay, means we don't have to repay.
Okay.
So we will vote for Nitish. So I mean that's one scheme that's really worked in their favor. At least in my impression, that seems to be the case. We still have, of course, one more phase of election to go, so things might change. But by and large, what I'm sharing is my impression alone. I'm not, and based on the areas where I have traveled. There may be, there are several pockets where I did not go. So I'm not in any position to say how things are panning out there. But at least in districts like Muzaffarpur, in Samastipur, Darbhanga, Purnia, Supol, Araria, Katiyar, Kishanganj, Khagaria, this is the situation.
Right. Very interesting. So we spoke about SAR's impact, the impact of promises, how it's reflecting on the ground. Just hours before the voting for the first phase of the election even started, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi, holds a press conference, calls it H files, and talks about the alleged irregularities in Haryana elections. Has Rahul Gandhi's accusations on the election commission, has it made a small impact or any kind of impact on the ground?
Well,
What do
none
you?
that I could see.
All
None
right.
that I
Okay.
could see. And I think, I mean, in terms of its timing, I think the Haryana expose was poorly timed because, in Bihar, yesterday, uh, uh, in the day he made that he did the press conference. And late evening, when I was, still traveling in some of the areas, nobody had any interest or even any idea of what were the revelations he's made.
Right. Right. Okay.
Of course, there's a certain media bias. It's not projected. It's not published and broadcast in the way that it and a serious allegation like that should have been. But
Mhm.
also, in Bihar at the moment, the priority for everyone else is their own election. So, for an ordinary Bihari, connecting the dots with what has happened in Haryana, and that to a year ago, to
Right.
perhaps makes very little sense. So it's a press conference that simply got lost in all the other noise of the election. For at least for Bihar, I don't know how it may have impacted outside of Bihar. But at
Right.
least if the idea of the Congress party was to encash that revelation for the, and influence the Bihar results, at least in the first phase of polling, I don't see that happening.
Right. All right. So we have reached to the end of our discussion. Any closing thoughts? What you're expecting out of the
Well, so this
first
is 50% of the state voting today. We'll have to wait and see how the other, it's pretty much a decisive, this phase itself could pretty much prove to be decisive, considering if you do a simple math of 50% of the seats.
right.
But the next phase has districts again where both these phases, they've got a mix of districts where in the previous elections the NDA has also performed well, and
Correct.
certain districts where the Grand Alliance performed very well, you know
Correct.
so similarly you'll have that mix in the next round too. So any kind of a very clear, very decisive comment on how the election is panning out may still be very premature. But
Right.
certainly, it's an election that might, the results might leave many people very surprised.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's been a very a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much. And viewers, for more such
Thank you.
analysis, keep watching the video. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.